Hi, so today we're going to be looking at Blake Lively's response, the amended response. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at how sometimes when you've been maybe falsely accused, what happens in those scenarios and how can you defend yourself, or what can we learn from this whole situation for ourselves. So we're going to be going through this, and hopefully it will be like a learning tool around toxic relationships at the same time. Now, obviously, where I don't know anything about the legal side. That's not my criteria. But what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at what happens in toxic relationships. I'm not saying that she is toxic. I'm not saying that there is something wrong with her. However, I'm just wanting to help us understand what happens in toxic relationships. And I think right at the beginning, we can see here, this tells us so much about when we're in a toxic relationship, what we need to look out for on a day-to-day level. A lot of the time, the toxic individual won't have actual evidence, won't have anything substantial. When we're talking about evidence, what are we talking about? We're talking about something you have done. So it's some behavior that you have done that has upset somebody else. When someone attacks you as an individual, like who you are, your values, what you're about, that means they haven't, or your character. Basically, if someone attacks your character, that is a massive red flag. That shows you they don't have anything about what you're doing. So they're attacking you as an individual, as a person. So if you look at right at the beginning of this helps us really understand what's going to happen in the rest of this amended complaint. She starts with, are you confident enough to listen to the women in your life, to hear their ideas and their solutions, to hold their anguish and actually believe them, even if what they're saying is against you? And will you actually stand up and do something so that one day we don't have to live in a world where a woman has to risk everything and come forward to say the words, me too? So what she's doing here is she's quoting Justin Baldoni in 2017. Okay. She's taking something completely out of context, something that is to do with him, his values, his character, his brand. And she is highlighting that. And this is out of context. And the reason why I'm bringing this up, the fact that it's out of context, is that when we hear things like this on a day-to-day level, what happens is there's cognitive dissonance. So what we're seeing here is maybe with toxic relationships, there's this thing called gaslighting. And a lot of the time when someone's really good at gaslighting, and usually they use a certain weapon over and over again, it could be that they use cognitive dissonance, which is in your brain, you've got two different thoughts, or you're having these two different thoughts that are in conflict with each other. What this is doing is setting up cognitive dissonance. And as we go through the whole amended complaint, we'll find that they're building on top of more and more confusion. So we feel completely confused by the end of it, where we just like, I give up. I don't really understand what's actually happening here, until we actually just follow with her narrative, if you like. So what this is doing is saying that this is Justin Baldoni. So why is it in this scenario he's not just hearing their ideas to their solutions? Why is it that he's not standing up and doing something so that where a woman has to risk everything to come forward and say the words, me too? So she's creating this cognitive dissonance in us, whereas as if we're going to take everything out of context and just start believing that we have to believe every single woman that says anything, and that they couldn't falsely accuse anyone of anything. It doesn't make sense to put that in this, because what she's doing is accusing him of SH, and he's saying, I never did that. So what she's saying is that he shouldn't be protecting himself if I have said something against him. And that then she's using this as a quote to create cognitive dissonance. What we're going to be seeing over time is some of the patterns that happen and why toxic individuals use cognitive dissonance. And what the ultimate the ultimate aim of it is power and control, and we can see over time. So I wanted to start with that. I know that's a long introduction, but I think it really sets the scene here of what's going to happen. So number two that I wanted to bring up is she says here that Miss Lively played the leading role of Lily Bloom in the film. At all times during the production, editing, and promotion of the film, Mr. Baldoni was Miss Lively's boss. Okay, so again, what we want to do is really understand, the patterns. Patterns are so important. And what I believe is a pattern is that we're getting confusion. This confusion or cognitive dissonance is created around boundaries. Okay. Just bear that in mind. Cognitive dissonance is created around boundaries. Now, what she's doing here, or her team are doing here, Miss Lively's team are doing here, is that they're saying that Miss Lively was not in a position of power, and that Mr. Baldoni was her boss at all times. But what she's missing is the fact that she didn't sign a contract. So she didn't sign up to the contractual agreements around Mr. Baldoni being her boss. So that's a big piece missing. So what we're finding here is that they will miss out key points on purpose, okay? And a lot of the time, cognitive dissonance is created around twisting facts to suit the narrative that you're trying to create. So there's a bit of a delusion going on and a disillusion as well. So things get taken out of context. So the other thing here is I have noticed that there is a lot of an attack on Mr. Baldoni's himself, his character, a lot of the time. And what sometimes happens in toxic relationships is, say if you create confusion or cognitive dissonance around boundaries, okay, then what you can do is you can use partial facts to create confusion and then say to somebody, you're bad as a person, as an individual, so the other person, so that they can get power and control intentionally by actually creating cognitive dissonance in another person. And that the end goal is to get power and control and maybe be seen as like the hero, the savior, the heroine, or whatever it is that you want to be seen as, that the person wants to be seen as. So we're going to be looking at that pattern over and over again, but we're just highlighting it now. So the other thing is things have to be taken out of context to be able to create cognitive dissonance. So number 4, actually, we look at is in public, Mr. Baldoni gave the appearance of taking responsibility for the fact that he had unconsciously been hurting and silencing the women in his life, and implored men to be man enough to stand up, shut the hell up and listen to women. He claimed that he wanted to end toxic masculinity and acknowledging his own toxic behavior by admitting there is a woman or two that I have in some way made uncomfortable by saying something or doing something that is chauvinistic or sexist. There is 1,000,000% probability that it exists. I mean, this is so taken out of context. It's not even appropriate to bring this in, because what that is focusing on character again. It's like his character rather than any facts. So remember, if you're in a toxic relationship, They won't have anything that you are doing, so that what they have to do is to devalue your character, who you are, what you're about, so that they can start to devalue you or to make you look like the bad person. And this keeps happening. So even number 5, she's actually devaluing him. And one of the things that I want to highlight here is one fact witness shown to publicly support Miss Lively recently received a written threat against, indicating the witness's family would be SA'd and killed, etc., which is terrible. And this type of climate was a predictable, if not inevitable, result. So she's blaming Baldoni for the fact that other people can't stand up for her and her narrative. Now, it appears that the pattern could be and this happens in toxic relationships. They create cognitive dissonance where they take facts and they twist them to suit their narrative. They create confusion in your own brain, so you don't know what is true, what to believe. And then the fact that you can't believe anything, you get irritated at yourself for that as well. And then they tell you you're a bad person. And sometimes they can do that by creating an illusion, by getting everybody else on their side, using flying monkeys to actually, like get across their narrative, using other people to get across their narrative that they want, and then isolate you. And so in this instance, we can't, it could be that they had recruited flying monkeys, and now the flying monkeys don't really want to be part of this anymore. It could be that way. One of the things that comes across over and over again is a complete lack of accountability, and it is quite worrying that it's delusional to the point that it's that worrying. Number 6, the dangerous climate of threats, harassment, intimidation fueled by the defendant's retaliation campaign has required Miss Lively to alter her personal and professional life. I do believe that she has had to do that. And I'm sure it's been really difficult for her given the backlash that she's received. Unfortunately, the biggest problem, that the reason why she's getting such a backlash, is because she's not coming out and actually admitting to and taking accountability for the parts that she needs to be accountable for. And that is where the backlash is happening, not because of Justin Baldoni, telling her to act in certain ways with interviews, or telling her, I'm sure Justin Baldoni didn't say, you should go out and promote your hair care products and you should go out and promote all your alcohol brand, for this film. It wasn't him that gave her the ideas and told her how to behave in front of other people and how to treat interviewers. So that was where the backlash was coming, is that it was that she wasn't understanding her audience, and she wasn't understanding how important this film was for so many people. And that's where she's not being able to take accountability. And that is where the problem is. Again, number 7 is really quite concerning, really. And it's just, I do feel like a lot of this is very childish. You do wonder, like, what is this? Number 7, Miss Lively brought this lawsuit because she was one of the women or two that Mr. Baldoni 100% made uncomfortable on the set. I mean, really? You're taking something that was out of character, so his quote, and then you're bringing that up to say this. But what she's doing here is she's creating cognitive dissonance, because she's actually saying she was one of the women or two. So which is it? Is it one or two? This is your lawsuit. This isn't a joke. This isn't a time to be, putting in jokes, etc. 1,000,000% made uncomfortable. So I think this is really, really not appropriate. And it is an attack on his character again. It's unneeded, it's devaluation, and it's not appropriate. From my own personal opinion, um, and I think that is not okay. Again, um, she's attacking his character. Miss, but Miss Lively was not the only one who was uncomfortable on set, and Mr. Baldoni and Wayfarer knew it. Well, do we know it? Do we have any evidence? You know, or what is the difference? There's a huge amount of difference between being uncomfortable and SH. Huge amount. You know, sometimes we can all make people uncomfortable at times. And sometimes some people are just uncomfortable all the time, no matter what, or easily made can be triggered and feel uncomfortable. Is it to do with Mr. Baldoni's and Mr. Wayfarer knew it? Is it to do with Baldoni, or is it to do with Miss Lively being sensitive? We don't know, because we don't have the ability to actually look at the facts. The only thing that we do know is that we've seen a video where she had said one thing, and then we saw with our own eyes that that didn't happen as she had written it. So that then means that we can't then know for sure what Miss Lively is saying is actual fact, or is it something that she's maybe changed slightly to align with her narrative. We don't know. More importantly, the defendant's false narrative crumbles under the indisputable truth that Miss Lively was not alone in complaining about Mr. Baldoni and raised her concerns. Look, again, we don't know for sure. We don't know. How do we know it's indisputable truth? So I'll be honest, a lot of this, the other thing that we need to look at is word salad. A lot of the time when you're dealing with someone that's toxic, they will throw loads of words, and a lot of it doesn't even make sense. And there's just so many words, and they're just hoping for something to stick, for a word to trigger, so that you then get triggered and aren't able to use your cognitive thinking part of the brain, so that then they can somehow confuse you into believing their narrative. So word salad, I mean, when there's just a lot of words that don't mean anything, there's no substance, there's no evidence, a lot of it is down to word salad. So it's really important when you're in these type of relationships to look at, what is the person saying? What are the facts? Facts are so important. What are the facts? And what do I need to deal with? And just ignore all the other salad around it. Just get to the core, nice, healthy stuff, of what is it that they're trying to get across, the core points that they need to get across. She is giving the impression that, Mr. Heath and Mr. Baldoni are creeps. And I actually didn't like this either. Like, I'll be honest, I didn't think this was great for Miss Lively to put in, because she's actually saying something negative about, the wife. And I thought that was quite, I don't think that's appropriate to actually for her to say this. I thought this looked bad on her rather than the other way around, to be honest. But that's just my perception. So I don't think this did her any favors by saying this about someone else's wife. It didn't come across well to me. So then so cognitive dissonance, remember cognitive dissonance, and we're going to go through this. Over the following 3 days of May 2024, another female cast member reported her own concerns regarding Mr. Baldoni's unwelcome behaviour. Okay, and so we don't know what that is. We don't have any evidence. We still are so unclear. But what she's doing is she's saying it's not just me. So it's creating some level of cognitive dissonance. Like, what do we believe? What is happening? Can I actually get some clarity here? Then she says here, she says that she finds it difficult. Miss Lively responded that, I know that I find it really hard to speak to him. I try to cover it with busyness, but not sure that covers what's going on. Like, what is going on? I still don't know what's going on. She confided that she felt too uncomfortable on set. Okay, but for what? Why? What did they do? So if you think it through, so go back, it's around boundaries, creating cognitive dissonance around boundaries. What if the person doesn't even know what they're doing wrong because you can't identify what it is specifically? You know, you're not being specific about what is it that they're doing. You're saying they just make me feel uncomfortable, you know, and then that is then saying, so there's, you haven't created the boundaries. You haven't said yes to the intimacy coordinator and seen them so you can create boundaries. You haven't signed your contract so you can create boundaries. So then how then you can then are in a position to create cognitive dissonance around, I'm feeling uncomfortable, but the other person doesn't know why or what exactly has happened. And then you can take things out of context to create confusion and tell someone they're bad and attack them. So then that way you can have power and control and become the hero for everybody. That's what toxic individuals could do as a pattern, and you know, is a possibility that we're seeing that pattern here. Then she says, like, she's dreading going back to our film. Again, that doesn't really mean anything. How many people dread going back to work? You know, I kept getting hits of the experience in really upsetting ways, but we still don't know what those upsetting ways are. We don't know what is it that's upset her? What happened? What was the behavior? Not his character, but the behavior, right? That's the distinction here. Not his character, but his behavior. What did he do exactly, you know, for that, it to be causing you upset? And what was it that you was experiencing? We don't know. We don't know what is it that you were experiencing. And actually, that will come to in a bit as well as we go through this later on. Okay, so importantly, none of the requested protections were tied in any way to Miss Lively's creative input in the film and were made months before any discussions regarding the cut of the film. What is normal in toxic relationships that you're not going to have power and control straight away. It's very, very normal. You have to devalue, you have to create cognitive dissonance, you have to gaslight, you have to do all of this and make the other person feel bad about themselves so that you can get power and control in some way. So that kind of is understandable. At that moment in time, with the completion of the films, uncertain, Miss Lively did not request or nor did she receive any creative rights, editing rights, credits, and any other role on the film beyond her roles as an actress and executive producer. That's understandable because she wasn't in a position of power at that point, but it doesn't mean that she wasn't putting together a plan to be able to do that. Everything she requested as laid out in the document was designed to ensure safety and well-being of the cast and crew. But we don't know still what that safety and well-being was. Because you did, you know, is so you can see the cognitive dissonance. You can see in me now, right now, the cognitive dissonance in real time is like mind blowing. In other words, at the precise moment in time when Miss Lively had maximum leverage, that's not true. She didn't have maximum leverage at that point. Prior to resuming production, she did not leverage to obtain anything other than protections for herself and others to ensure a safe environment for all. So what she's done there is she's created confusion. No one really understood her points at that time. And she used partial facts and then she created confusion to be able to tell somebody that they are bad. Yeah. But then the next step is to use power and control. You're not going to have power and control to leverage anything at that time to say, I want this and I want that, because it wouldn't work. How can you say to someone, you're making me feel uncomfortable, and in order for me to feel comfortable, I need to have creative rights, editing rights. It doesn't make sense. At that point, she's got to say that you're a bad person, that you're creating unsafety, and then create more power. She needs it to leverage at a later stage. So this is like a nothing point, to be honest. It doesn't make sense to say it at that point. The notion that she did this as a plot to take control of the movie at a future point, which she did not do in any event, is absurd. Well, the fact that she did have more power and control over the movie at a later stage shows that is appropriate. So I don't know what they're trying to get from this, but it doesn't make sense what they're trying to get across. It doesn't make sense because everything has a cycle. Everything has a cycle. So, for instance, if you're going through a toxic relationship, they're not going to show their cards straight away. That just never happens. And even in the, DV movie, it didn't happen straight away. It's like something over time that occurs. So that's a nothing point. It doesn't make sense what they're trying to say there. Now, this is really, really important. This is really important. And I think this they shouldn't have put this in there, if you ask me. After receiving the document, Wayfarer responded that Wayfarer, Sony and production respectfully acknowledge that Ms. Lively had concerns regarding safety, professionalism in the workplace, although our perspective differs in many aspects. Ensuring safe environment for all is paramount, irrespective of the differing viewpoints. Amazing. So where there's cognitive dissonance, or where there's toxic relationships, if someone is creating confusion around boundaries, and this happens in all toxic relationships, they create confusion around boundaries, they will take things out of context. Yeah. And they will you'll look at the toxic individual and think they're delusional. They're living in a different reality. This is delusion. And you believe they're so delusional. What they're doing is they're taking things out of context on purpose, partial facts, and they're creating confusion so that they can say you're bad, even if it's not even happening. So it's very chaotic, so that they can get into a position to have more power and control. So what they're saying here is, we don't see what you're seeing. We're not seeing what you're seeing, but we see that safe environment is important, and we're doing that already. And we find most of them not only reasonable, but also essential for the benefits of all parties involved. So here, what she's trying to do is get into a position, or it appears that she's created an illusion that there is a boundary, cross here, and that these people are bad, so that she can have more power and control by creating these rules, creating some boundaries that are already in place as far as they're concerned, Wayfarer is concerned, so that she is perceived to be the hero or the I don't know, the savior or something in some way. So the other thing here, these are all the points that she brings up. And I thought this is, 22. As the cast and crew returned to production, Miss Lively reassured a female cast member that as a result of the protections that Wayfarer and Sony had agreed, you don't need to hug anyone this time. So a female cast member responded with gratitude, and Miss Lively continued, he won't touch you, or shouldn't, I don't think. And Miss Lively expressed her belief that it would be a professional set and we're getting good work. So again, she's setting herself up to be the savior, to be the hero. She's the one that's now in the power and control position to help everyone, to make everything a better place. And that they are bad. And so that can we see how potentially when we're in toxic relationships, they can make something out of nothing and make you seem as though that you've done something bad, that you're and that they have created the rules or they have done all the work, and so that everybody else buys into them. That it can happen. Now that appears to be what Wayfarer is saying, is like, we agree with whatever you're saying. This is something that we would want. But she's saying you don't need to hug him anymore. You don't need to hug anyone. You know, again, I think if it was SH as being thought of as, so if there is a culture of hugging in a certain company, everyone hugs each other, it's like a family kind of environment, and that is the way a certain person is, then all you need to do is say, you know what, I'm not really big on hugs. I don't like hugs, so that they understand what the boundary is. We don't need to, make it into something where we're perceiving it as though it's SH. So we have to look at what were the boundaries set right at the beginning, to clarify all of that, so that there was no misunderstandings here, or things can be taken out of context on purpose so that she could have taken over the film. We don't know, right? Now, I think this is really important. The marketing plan directed the cast to focus more on Lily's strength and resilience, as opposed to describing the film about DV, and avoid talking about the film that makes it sad and heavy. It's a story of hope. Okay. I think this is fine as a marketing plan. If that was the marketing plan by Sony, unfortunately, what Miss Lively isn't understanding is that people didn't have a problem with focusing on Lily's strength and resilience. The backlash from the public was that there was, from what I saw, not the focus on Lily's strength and resilience when promoting your hair care line or the alcohol brand. That wasn't focusing on Lily's strength and resilience. It really wasn't. Or saying to people that, wear your florals, grab your friends, let's go out and watch this film, because that isn't anything to do with strength and resilience. It really isn't. It has nothing to do with that. And a lot of the time, some of these people that were watching, if we're really looking at Lily, she might have had to go out and watch the film by herself, because she's been isolated. She's not got all these friends, massive groups of friends. Maybe she went and watched it by herself, but that shows strength and resilience. So a lot of the things needed to be really worked out, and they weren't really worked out. And that's where people really didn't feel heard and understood by Miss Lively. And there's a lack of accountability coming across here, where she really doesn't understand why people were not happy with the way she promoted the film. And if she was just able to see that, a lot of what people were feeling hurt about would have been dealt with so easily without any of this needing to go to court. And I think that's where she's lacking accountability. And a lot of toxic people just aren't able to take accountability. And that's where they deny, attack, and reverse the victim and offender. That's where that comes into play. Okay, so 24. Now, I have noted that in this, there is a big focus on wanting to highlight that Mr. Baldoni, what the public did not know was Mr. Baldoni and his team did so in an effort to explain why many of the film's cast and crew unfollowed Mr. Baldoni on social media and were not appearing with him in public. Now, I think this might be part of the pattern. So if we've seen that, there could be a pattern of behavior where she's poisoned people in the films before, like, we've seen in press releases. So what could be a pattern is that if there's false accusations around boundaries, yeah, that causes confusion where there's cognitive dissonance for people, where she uses partial facts and that creates confusion to be able to tell someone that they are bad, so that she gets into a position of power and control over maybe film cast and crew to become the hero or the savior, okay? To be the person, And what we're seeing here is that pattern of behavior might have worked over many, many years. And what she's potentially trying to say is, look, nobody liked him. So obviously, he must be a bad person. But we know if you've been in toxic relationships, that isn't the case. Sometimes the person that has all the flying monkeys, etc., around them are the people that who are toxic, and the person that's being isolated is actually the true victim. So what we have is potential for someone that doesn't understand that, hey, I've got all the flying monkeys and I've got all the people around me. Why are you believing that person that's been isolated? Why is this not working? I don't understand. So that could be a play here where there's a repeat of this over and over again, where there's just trying to get across that person wasn't liked over and over again as a tactic, but potentially. And if you're in that scenario, you want to really understand the flying monkeys that are recruited to spread a certain narrative. And when that narrative has been spread, they don't really need those flying monkeys as much anymore. So they won't have that much need. But right now, she needs them. She needs the people to be able to spread her narrative. And maybe it's not really working at the moment. I am going to be continuing with this in the next video, and I'll put that in. But I'm going to have a little bit of a break now, and I'll see you in a bit.